With that, I'd like to introduce Kaylee Dickenson, who is the State Drug Court Coordinator for West Virginia. Welcome to Justice Speaks, Kaylee.
Thank you so much, Brian.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. I'd like to start this interview by asking you to tell me about yourself.
Yes. First off, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this interview. I'm very excited to get to talk about West Virginia treatment courts. But, like you said, my name is Kaylee Dickenson. I've been the state drug court coordinator for the Supreme Court of Appeals for a little over a year and a half now. I started in criminal justice through my education at Glenville State University. I graduated there in 2016.
And your degree is?
A bachelor's degree in criminal justice.
Okay, go on.
And after I graduated college, I then started my criminal justice career in corrections. I was a correctional officer at Southern Regional Jail and as well as a correctional officer at Beckley Correction Center, where they had a work release program and a residential substance abuse treatment program.
I used to represent correctional officers way back, and I know that that's a very challenging job, and it must have been for you too.
It was, especially coming out of college, you kind of get a different idea of being a correctional officer. People never cease to surprise you. And it's difficult because you really see people kind of fail every day when you work at a regional jail. And it's hard to see the repeat offenders every single time, and I only worked in corrections for a year and a half.
Okay.
And then went to probation, which I was very excited about. New scenery, you get to deal with the court system along with the supervision part of it. As was an adult and juvenile probation officer, for a couple months, I started participating in our treatment team in Greenbrier and Pocahontas counties as the probation liaison. There, I got to learn a little bit about treatment courts. I attended our state drug court conference where I really got to learn about our treatment courts and how they operated and learned what best practices were and things like that. And then shortly after, I actually took over our adult drug court in Greenbrier and Pocahontas counties. So I ran two different drug courts at the same time, which I loved. I really enjoyed getting to create special bonds with the participants and actually getting to see people change their lives. I was a probation officer for our adult drug courts for about 4 years before I got promoted to the administrative office as a treatment court evaluator.
And that's for
And
the Supreme Court of Appeals in West Virginia?
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And in that role, I created a treatment court evaluation that was for our family treatment courts. They were newly operating and they wanted to see how they were operating per best practice standards. So
Okay.
that was my job. I evaluated 9 of the 14 before I got promoted as the state drug court coordinator.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. You are the state drug court coordinator and you work for the Supreme Court. What's involved in your job?
A little bit of everything. You know, it's a little, there's only one of me, and we have a lot of treatment courts in West Virginia for the population that we have. You know, for me specifically, I ensure that all of our treatment courts in the state operate within the best practice standards. And
And
I do
are
that.
these best practice standards promulgated by your Supreme Court of Appeals, or are they the national standards?
The national standards, we adopt the national standards in
Okay.
our state policy. So
Okay.
we create them as ours as well.
Okay, and so you work with courts to make sure they're using best practices in your drug treatment courts. What else?
So but doing so, I do the observations of all of the treatment courts. I do those yearly.
So you
And
travel
that,
the whole state.
yes, all 55 counties.
Well, I've only been to West Virginia a couple of times. Once I landed on a mountaintop in an airplane, and it was unusual. But Um, it's a pretty state.
It is, especially if you come during this time. Right now, the foliage of all of our trees, absolutely beautiful.
And so you get around the whole state then.
Yes, yeah. Friday, I will be going to Hampshire County, which is where the trees will be absolutely beautiful. It's up in the northern part of our state. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So, and you essentially are going in to make sure that people are doing it right. I'm taking this.
Yes. And then the unique thing is I provide them individual feedback. Through this observation system, I've kind of created a system where I observe their treatment team meetings and I observe their court sessions. I want to make sure that the judges are communicating with the participants for that 3-minute minimum that's the national best practices. That the topics that they should be talking about are discussed. And I create essentially an observation letter. Well, I'll let them know things that they do really well. I'll let them know things that they could improve on, and then I give them details of how to improve it. And some of them require additional training, which is completely fine. And then some don't necessarily require anything other than just a little bit of direction.
So let's talk about training. You do an annual training, I assume.
Yes. Well, we do a every other year training.
Okay.
The, the years that we don't have our state treatment court conference, we have a state probation conference.
Okay. So let's talk about the State Treatment Court Conference. You say it's every other year,
Yes.
and it's sponsored by the Supreme Court, I take it?
So that the state treatment court conference is actually what we use our BJA grant funds for.
Okay.
So our state treatment court conference, our next one's actually in fall of 2025. We're very excited, but
All
we
right. Well,
will,
I'm going to want to come back to that. So
yes.
go ahead.
Um, but we do these state treatment court conferences. Our probation officers, our judges, and any treatment team members that want to attend are more than welcome to attend the conference. The treatment court conference is free registration. Our probation officers and judges are able to get per diem, get reimbursed for meals and travel, and our day report centers or treatment providers are the ones that have to pay for their own meals and things, but they're still more than welcome to participate in our treatment court
Okay.
conference.
Let me ask you a little about that. How do people find out where this conference is going to be next year?
They find out through me emailing them and providing them that information. And then our education department completes a registration process where during that registration process, they'll request if they need to stay at a hotel, what days they'll be attending, and if they're going to be presenting.
Okay. All right. And so essentially you're inviting the people and they're responding to you. So there's a lot of labor in that.
Yes, it's a lot of collaborations, not just me. We always have an education committee that helps plan the treatment court conferences, and they really help with registration. So I can't say it's just me. They do a lot of work as well.
Okay. And you mentioned you do other types of training. I- what's involved in that?
Yes. So every year we'll have our judges have judicial conferences. They have them twice a year. That's just one of the types of trainings that we do every year.
Okay.
But in these trainings, we'll kind of either do a presentation or a conversation type session at these, and all the treatment court judges are able to attend this 2-hour session, and we'll kind of give an update on if there's any new best practices, or we'll talk about things that we could fix as a state. See, it's really a good idea place where judges can, bounce off each other and figure out things that they're doing that's working, and just kind of helps the judges across the state.
Okay. So that's good. So
Yeah.
how are drug courts funded in your state?
So this is something unique that I've learned through the state coordinators meeting. All of our adult drug courts and juvenile drug courts are funded by the Supreme Court of Appeals.
Really?
Yes, it's in our
That
court's
is unique.
budget.
Okay, so it's part of their budget and
Mhm.
it's then distributed to the different courts, I take.
Yes, yeah, they have certain budgets they have to stay within. Like our juvenile drug courts have each juvenile drug court that we have has $3,000 to spend on incentives. That includes incentive trips, tangible incentives, anything like that. And then they have $1,000 to spend on graduations, with food and everything. And that's every fiscal year that they get that.
Wow. Go ahead.
Our adult drug courts are also have participant funds that they charge the participants, and that's how they're able to pay for incentives and graduation and things like that. The biggest thing that our court probably spends is the treatment and drug screening.
Okay, well, let me just say that it's unique that the state's funding uh, rewards in that way. That's something that other states should be looking at in terms of what you guys are doing, because that's very innovative. Uh,
Honestly, I can't say enough about our Supreme Court justices, the collaboration that we have had with them. Our drug courts started out grant funded, but early on, the Supreme Court justices put it into the budget, and that's how we're able to operate them. So I think without the collaboration and the support with them, I don't know that we would be able to do it.
it sounds like that your Supreme Court's fully on board and they're doing things that support, not only support drug courts, but expand it, which I think is really interesting. Because that's
Most
not the case nationally necessarily. Some places are not as enlightened as that. Um, so what do you think the greatest accomplishment of your office has been?
So I think that we've had multiple different accomplishments. When I think about how many different treatment courts that we have, because we have adult drug courts, family treatment courts, veteran treatment courts, and juvenile drug courts in West Virginia.
Okay.
And I really think that they have all had kind of different accomplishments. Like for our adult drug court, you know, we have worked really hard in making sure that the participants get every tool possible. They learn everything that they need to so that when they graduate, they aren't rearrested. And so right now, our recidivism rate is 12%.
Really? That's good.
Yes, so we've had since 2005 1,382 graduates, and only 163 of those have been rearrested.
That's really good. And
Yes, that's
that's
definitely one of our biggest accomplishments for adults.
I must say that that's an outstanding statistic because the way this works, um, we've been learning over time in drug courts. When I started in treatment courts a long, long time ago, we didn't have the sort of best practices that we do now.
Yeah,
And having someone that teaches people best practices and goes in and makes sure people are following them really is an advantage because it results in what you just said, which is an amazingly effective program.
yeah,
I,
or
I'm very impressed by that. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
oh
What?
no, you're fine. I wanted to kind of follow up on kind of what you were saying. I really think in the future, I would love for us to start being able to track the recidivism on termination so that we would be able to kind of compare because that recidivism, of course, is only for graduates. We're
Okay.
trying to work a little bit more on our data to see if we can find any other amazing accomplishments.
Well, one of the things I discovered when I was in Michigan, we called DWI drug courts sobriety courts.
Mhm.
Um, when I started out doing a sobriety court, was that even for the people that fail in the program, there are better outcomes than there are for people who never enter into a treatment program. And that has always seemed to me to be one of those unspoken advantages of the program is that if you get people in, they're going to do better even if they don't make it through the program. And with the new best practice approaches, they're more likely to stay in the program than when I started out, where we had a three strikes and you're out, which was totally wrong, but
Yeah.
that was something we learned over time. So I think that you're correct, but I'm still very impressed by that number.
Thank you.
Um,
Um,
Go ahead. You were telling me about the rest of the accomplishments.
Yeah, so with our family treatment courts, we again kind of do something a little bit unique. We really wanted with our family treatment courts to focus on reunification and permanency with the biological parents.
Okay.
We didn't want to do, reunification to kinships or foster parents or anything like that. Um, unless if we absolutely had to. So we've looked at our data. We've had our family treatment courts for about since 2019, I believe. So we've
Okay.
had them for a good enough time to where we're able to kind of compare our reunification and permanency rates to kind of the West Virginia and national standard.
Okay.
So currently, our family treatment courts, it takes 11.3 months to reunify back to the biological parent and 15.5 months for permanency with the biological parent.
Really?
Yes. And when you look at the West Virginia average for children exiting foster care, it takes them 18.8 months. And the national average as of 2022, it takes 22.6 months. So in our family treatment courts, we're seeing that we're having a higher success and we're able to reunify and achieve permanency faster with the biological parents than what the West Virginia and national average is looking.
That's impressive. And really, frankly, it's not a statistic that I've run across very often. So the fact that you guys are looking at that and applying that to your practices is really interesting. So, does that encompass what you think are your greatest successes?
I have one more. I have
Okay.
to, of course, talk about our juvenile drug courts as well.
Okay.
You know,
This is a challenging area, juvenile drug courts.
it is. It is. And the next judge that I'm going to talk about is Judge Stowers from Putnam County, West Virginia. His juvenile drug court, he sees a lot of truancy cases in his juvenile drug court, and they have been open since 2010. They have graduated well over 100 participants, and out of those graduates, all of them have successfully graduated from high school, which is
Wow.
rare
Great.
because, the goal in juvenile drug court, of course, is to make sure, you set them up for the next best thing and to make sure that they're not going to, go back into the court system. And with his juvenile drug court, he's really setting them up for the best success. And
That's an impressive number.
yeah,
You know, I don't know if you guys have promoted whatever it is this judge is doing, but you might want to.
yes,
Juvenile drug courts, historically at least, have not been as successful as adult drug courts. In part, I think because um, male who are under the age of 21 don't have adult brain chemistry yet. And that always impacts on their behavior. But I really think that that's a very impressive statistic and bodes well for the program.
yes.
So, what do you think your greatest challenges are?
So in West Virginia, we are a very rural area. We are very small. Our biggest city is where our capital is, and that's Charleston. So we have kind of multiple different challenges. Individualized treatment is one of our biggest ones because not every county even has a treatment provider.
Right.
We have tried our best to kind of combat this issue with partnering up with our local day report centers, which are community correction facilities that work within the community to provide individual counseling, group counseling. They'll do drug screening, the community service, they do case management. They really help our participants a lot.
Okay.
And I can't say enough great things, because they have stepped up in where we lack a lot of individualized treatment. And they will provide transportation, which is our next biggest challenge,
Okay.
because
Makes sense.
because we're so rural, we don't have public transportation in every single county. And as you know, a lot of these participants don't have driver's license. They don't even have the means to obtain their driver's license sometimes. And so it's a really big struggle that we have in West Virginia that unfortunately we still have this challenge a lot. Um, And I think I have one more, challenge that I think West Virginia has that's different from others. Um, and it says it in the national best practice standards is that you're supposed to have a probation officer and a coordinator. And in West Virginia, the probation officer serves both of those roles for all of our treatment courts.
I understand that's a challenge, but I also understand that probation officers can do that. They certainly did it in my court.
Yes.
Um, and it's nice to have an individual who's just the coordinator. But if
Mhm.
you're limited monetarily, a probation officer often has that role anyway, simply because they become the fulcrum of the staffing session because they have all of the different information that everybody else only has a piece of.
Yes. And honestly, our probation officers do a really good job of making sure that they can do both roles. So I can't thank them enough for how great that they do with that.
Well, how do you think problem-solving courts or drug courts can be improved in your state?
I think we've already kind of started on this since I've taken over this position, but I think the biggest thing that we can improve on is being able to provide more guidance to our local courts. Our state policy it's old. It's been in there since 2019. A lot of things have changed since then. And, we really need to improve that policy so that way it actually provides actual guidance for our
Hmm.
treatment courts.
So-
Because if you look at it right now, it's not necessarily going to tell you how to operate a treatment court.
Okay. All right. And so where do you see treatment courts in 10 years?
So in 10 years, I would really like for our treatment courts to expand, of course. We already have a good bit of adult drug courts, but I would really like to see our juvenile drug courts and family treatment courts to expand more. I would love for West Virginia to be able to have more collaboration with mental health treatment providers. That way we can help those coexisting mental health and substance use disorders. And I would really, in 10 years, love to see our judges be able to not have to have a regular judicial docket as well. I would love for them to be able to only focus on treatment courts because our judges in
Absolutely.
West Virginia do, this as voluntarily and they still have everything, and I know that's a long shot, but I think that
Well,
that
and
would be
particularly in
awesome.
those smaller counties where there's only one judge,
Yeah.
um, it it is a challenge.
Mhm.
But I also think that the judges that commit to a drug court conference or a drug court approach do so because they want the best outcomes.
Yes.
And they're willing to give up a little time in order to do a better job. And I think that's always going to be the case, really, frankly, in particularly in those smaller counties where there's only the one judge.
Yeah.
Um, well, with that, I'd like to thank you for coming on Justice Speaks. It's been a wonderful interview, and I've learned some things. And so, once again, have a good day.
Thank you so much, Brian.